I think about books and what I've been writing and where I've been going with my thought processes about life and what happens and what makes people successful. And the number one thing that I found out is that if I can some kind of way change my life and start doing different things every day, that I open up a lot of opportunities to see other ways of living, better ways of living. And it all requires me to take action. Taking action is impossible for so many of us. And it's one of the little secrets that I'm going to share with you this morning. So the basic concepts of actually growing is we have to take 100% responsibility for what happens to us. And so I learned from a concept of Maslow's triangle. I don't know if you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a triangle that basically operates from the bottom up to the top, and it's a hierarchy of needs. It's what basically says, what's the basic human need? The basic human need for food, shelter, clothing. That's all at the bottom of that triangle. That's the first thing we as human beings have to do. And this book that I've recently written will teach you how to fill up the bottom of that triangle. How do you get food? How do you get shelter? How do you get clothing? To do any of those things, you have to have either money, power, or success. And how do you get those? My book has a step-by-step process that'll teach you how to go through that process. And at the end of it, you'll have all the money you'll want to make if you do what the book tells you. And that's the bottom of this triangle. At the top of this triangle is what's known as self-actualization. And that's what the second half of my book talks about. It talks about how do we grow to maturity, to be self-aware, actualizing in our lives and what we do, and how do we get to the top of the pyramid where we have peace, serenity, joy, contemplation. The whole book is focused around those things. And when I started this process, I read 3 books, and some of you might be aware of them. The first book that I read back in 1974 or 5, right out of college, was a book by Napoleon Hill. It was Think and Grow Rich. And that book basically said that anything you're capable of thinking of, you can achieve in your life if you think about it enough and you focus about it enough. After that, about 40 years later, there's another book I read called Creative Visualization by Shakti Gawain. And the concept of creative visualization is that you can create anything in your life if you focus on it enough. Now, the only problem with those 2 concepts is that there was no science behind it whatsoever. When Napoleon Hill wrote that book, most of the people in the world said, "Are you kidding me? That's a bunch of hogwash. You mean you can just think of something and you can actually materialize it, manifest it into reality? That is a bunch of BS." When Shakti Gawain wrote her book in 1976, 40 years after that one, there was no science. Creative visualization says, the more you think about what, you will become. And then another 40 years after that, in today's language, about 7 or 8 years ago, a lady by the name of Caroline Leaf wrote a book called Switch On Your Brain. And in that book, she demonstrates that we now have the brain science that says, in fact, that if you do think about what you want, you can manifest it in your life. And so now what Shakti Gawain and Napoleon Hill wrote 40 to 100 years ago is proven that it works.